Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to talk about Abyss stacking, which is one of the Atlas strategies that you can consider using in the 3.15 environment. Now this is a currency generation strategy mostly for trade leagues. If you're a solo self-found player, you might occasionally get to use this if you happen to roll specific sextant mods. You might be able to do a little bit of messing around with this. But fundamentally, this is mostly a strategy that is aimed for trade leagues where you can pick up watchstones that have specific Maven sextant rolls already on them. Now, this is new Vastir centered because of the 2-point node you see on the tree here, Abyssal Army. Abyssal Army causes monsters in areas, Abyss monsters in areas to grant 50% increased XP, which is great. But more importantly, Abysses in areas spawn 100% increased monsters. We're then going to throw as many extra Abysses onto these maps as we can through the use of Scarabs and also through the use of Sextants. There is also a node behind Abyssal Army called Votive Horde. This is a mediocre and optional node. Ironically, the small node is actually better. The small node that is between Abyssal Army and Votive Horde is actually better than Votive Horde is. That gives you a 5% chance to get an additional Abyss. That said, you may as well take Votive Horde. It's something. Now, this video and strategy will assume that you have a character capable of smooth and fast tier 16 maps. Additionally, the longer that you go through this video, the more we'll start talking about advanced ways to scale this up into the stratosphere. And eventually we're going to finish with strategies that involve 100% Delirious maps using Cirrus Watchstones to raise them to tier 17. And so that's something that is absolutely power gamer only. But we're going to start with things that I think that a typical player that's got a Shaper capable character should be able to do. Now this will be great experience as well, XP that is. So the basics. This is all about stacking loot multipliers for Abysses. It's not so much about the Abyssal Trove contents and not at all about Abyssal Depths, should you get any of those. Those are a bonus. The real loot is the monsters we kill along the way. So the loot multipliers we're stacking. Divination Scarabs. These multiply loot per monster. Monsters per Abyss, number of Abysses, and sometimes we'll also use Shaper Scarabs. In fact, you can always use Shaper Scarabs if you want. They're pretty cheap and they're actually really undervalued in trade leagues. Like you should just, you can feel confident to throw a Shaper Scarab into any tier 16 map you're running and that there's a reasonable chance of getting a payoff from it. So a quick reminder about two mechanics. Firstly, well-rolled Abyss jewels from the 3.14.0 patch notes. Rare Abyss jewels that drop from Abyssal Troves now use the well-rolled modifier system. So this was a line of text in the patch notes that was largely ignored in the Ultimatum League. But in practice, this means that you always get 4 mods from these well-rolled Abyss jewels, and you have a better chance of getting good mods, but the better chance of getting good mods is nothing to write home about. It's a bonus, it's just not amazing. My experience, 1 in 50 well-rolled jewels are quite good, and definitely will sell, and 2 to 3 more out of 50 will sell. Like, they'll be okay. They'll sell for something, just not for very much. Also, item level 86 Abyss jewels are better and are worth something as craft bases. However, item level 86 Abyss jewels are pretty hard to come by with this strategy. You will only get them if you follow the tier 19 version, which is one of the advanced versions I'll talk about later. So, the other thing we need to recap is the interaction of Delirium and Abysses. So this is about the Delirium mirror, not about Delirium layers. And this is a change that was made very early in Delirium League in patch 3.10.0.E for Echo. Activating or completing several time-consuming gameplay elements causes the Delirium Mist to stop moving for a set amount of time based upon the encounter type. The following conditions cause the Delirium Mist to stop moving: an Abyss crack reaching its next location. ... The rest of it's not relevant. So the TLDR is that progressing an Abyss will give you more time until the mirror collapses. Just be aware that you still need to be ahead of the mirror by a little bit in case it goes backwards. But as long as you're a little bit ahead of the mirror, then you'll find that Deliriums and Abysses do actually interact pretty well. So we're stuck in New Vastir because of Abyssal Army. So what are the maps that are available? We have access to the following with 4 watchstone versions. I'm only going to think of the 4 watchstone versions here. That's because I feel like we're using consumables that are just a bit too expensive to justify on lower tier maps. You can certainly, if you want to just try this out at, say, if you're in, say, tier 8 maps and you want to just give this a go, then you can give it a go. You can allocate Abyssal Army and just use the cheapest versions of the Scarabs. So use rusted or polished Abyss Scarabs so that you're not wasting any expensive consumables. and save the gilded scarabs and any winged ones you might happen to have for the period in time when your character's a bit more powerful. But we are looking at Mudgeyser 16, Alleyways 16, Crystal Ore 16, Resident 16, Burial Chambers 15, Grave Trough 15, Reef 15, Dungeon 15, Lighthouse 15, Palace 15, Bone Crypt 15, Barrows 14, Shipyard 14, and Museum 14. Two of these stand out to me, Alleyways and Burial Chambers, and we'll just look at their strengths quickly. So Alleyways, tier 16. Layout is above average but not spectacular, and it has a good divination card. It has the Saint's Treasure. Now, the Saint's Treasure is basically 1/5 of an Exalted Orb. It's uncommon, not really all that rare, and it's something that you can probably self-compile a set of if you're persistent enough at this. Now, the fact that the Saint's Treasure grants you pure Exalted Orbs reduces the amount of trading, but also because it grants pure Exalted Orbs, pretty much everyone wants this card, and so it's the sort of thing that if at the time that I'm recording this video, Exalted Orbs are trading for 155 Chaos. If you list a Saint's Treasure for 30 Chaos, which is just 1C below the expected value of it, you will find that you will get hit by potential buyers immediately. So that's a good thing. That makes it easier to sell. The layout is also quite Abyss friendly in Alleyways. The layout's also fairly solid, but not spectacular for use of the Delirium mirror, should you elect to force that onto maps with Zana. Now, this is an expensive option, a viable option as well, and it's one that we'll get to when we talk about the advanced approaches. So Burial Chambers tier 15 is next. And this has arguably the single best jackpot divination card in the game. That's the Doctor. So there are more valuable cards than the Doctor, but they are staggeringly more rare. The Doctor is that balance where of the cards that are more than about 5 exalts, it's the most common of them. However, Doctors are a jackpot drop. They are not something to expect. You should expect that you get nothing, even if you do a bunch of Burial Chambers. You might get a Doctor, and if you do, fantastic, but you should expect not to see one. The layout of this map is very well suited to Abysses, and it is also extremely well suited to the Delirium Mirror. In my opinion, it's the third best map in the game for the Delirium Mirror. Some people will disagree with that, but I think everyone will agree that it is a good layout for the Delirium Mirror. So let's talk about how the setup works. Firstly, you are going to try to get the Maven Elevated Sextant mod that causes areas to contain 3 additional abysses. You are not going to try to roll this yourself. The reason that you're not going to try and roll this yourself is that it's about 1.4% chance to get it. What you're going to want to do is trade for an Ivory Watchstone. So this is one of the Cirrus unique drops watchstones that can go in any region of the Atlas that has this already on it. So these are the only sextants. These are the only watchstones in the game that are not bound to character, but that are also not region locked. You're going to want to trade for one of these that someone else has already put a Maven Sextant on, and that has the 3 additional Abysses mod on it. Now, at the time that I'm recording this video, you can get the bad watchstones, so that's Territories Unknown and Irresistible Temptation for 1 Exalt with this mod already on them. And you can get better watchstones like Booming Populace or War Among the Stars for 1.5 to 2 Exalts. And that's with this mod already on them. Additionally, just be aware that the number of uses remaining on the Sextant mod can be a bit misleading. In the case of this Booming Populace that I'm showcasing here, you'll see that it's got 16 uses left on the Sextant mod, but 15 on the actual watchstone itself. Obviously, this can only be used 15 times, and so this is actually 15 uses, not 16 uses. You'll also see down here that we've got I've got a setup for the trade website. So here you just type in Ivory Watchstone. You'll need to scroll down below all of the unique watchstones that will come up there, and just pick Ivory Watchstone in general. And then you want to go enchant area can contain abysses, and then you're good to go. This will bring up areas contain 1 additional abyss, which is a Prime Sextant mod, 2 additional abysses, which is an Awakened Sextant mod, and 3 additional abysses, which is an Elevated mod. We're only really going to, just to save the amount of trading necessary, we're only going to focus on the Maven ones, but you can easily just sort by the number of additional abysses. In the event that the Maven Sextant mod becomes too expensive, you will then go with 2 additional abysses instead. Now, one thing that you need to be aware of is that Territories Unknown Territories Unknown is a sextant mod that adds an additional suffix. This might add 0 regen. Irresistible Temptation adds a random prefix. This might add a reflect mod your character can't beat. If your character can't beat reflect mods, and you have an Irresistible Temptation with 3 additional abysses on it, you need to be very careful about how you handle that. What I suggest you do is you find another Maven Sextant, but this one is one that has players and their minions are unaffected by reflected damage. You also sit this into the same region of the Atlas. If you have Territories Unknown and you're worried about getting 0 regen, you just need to carry a Mana Flask in most builds. So, part 2 of our setup is the Scarabs. Now, just be aware that you're going to need to get a bunch of Gilded or Winged Abyss Scarabs. These have gone up in price even since last night when I was making this presentation. So you'll see here that I've got prices of 33.5C for Winged Abyss Scarabs and 7.5 for Gilded. Sorry, they're currently 52 and 13 respectively. You will definitely need Gilded and Winged. Polished are quite a lot worse. Though you can use them if if you want to double around, then definitely give the lesser sextant mod. So that's the one that comes from an awakened sextant plus 2 additional abysses, and in conjunction with polished abyss scarabs, and that combination's fine. You can get yourself started on this experiment that way. But winged and gilded are much better, and we'll talk about when you'd use winged and when you'll use gilded later. But basically, wingeds will give you about 42% more additional monsters on your map. So ultimately, I suggest you use winged if and only if you're using one of the advanced maxed use options. Divination scarabs are also really important, and they have similar diminishing returns. So they start costing more and more and more, and the actual return that you get, the bang for your buck, gets smaller and smaller. So you'll see here that winged divination scarabs are 36C, gilded are 11C, and polished are 2. Always use at least polished scarabs. Always at least polished. But then you can upgrade to gilded if you think it's worth it, and you can upgrade further to winged if you think that's worth it as well. Some juice levels may call for additional scarabs, and you really can't go wrong adding in shaper scarabs, like I was mentioning before. They can be rusted even. So add 15 of each. Prices have gone up since I made this presentation, and oops, I'm going to take credit or blame for this because I did discuss in my Discord what I was writing up a video about. And it seems like some enterprising person has decided to go and do a massive buy-up of the relevant scarabs. So, your basic setup. Firstly, you want to chisel and elk 15 of the map you're doing. Optionally varlet as well. Next, you want to sextant all of your watchstones that are not the ones that you've already sextanted. So, let's say you've got a booming populace set up with +3 additional abysses, and you're just using 3 classic watchstones in the other spots. Then you just want to use either Maven Elevated Sextants, or you can use the Awakened Sextants instead, depending on what you think is worthwhile. Run your maps applying the Zana Abyss mod. Note that some of the advanced approaches might forego this in order to use Delirium instead. Now, if you are using Gilded Scarabs, Maven Abyss Sextant, and the small node Past Abyssal Army, you will have 6.18 abysses on average, each with 250% base monster count. That's basically 15.45 abysses worth of monsters. Lots of XP, lots of stuff to kill, and lots of loot to grab. If you're using Winged Scarabs in the same setup, you'll get 7.18 abysses of 300% base monster count for 21.54 effective abysses. Divination Scarabs then scale up the effect of these extra monsters a lot further. Polished doubles div cards, Gilded double and a half, Winged triple and a half. You'll also find that if you're doing the Gilded Scarab setup, each of the individual abysses that you do will give you about 70% of the XP of the entire map. That's been my experience with it. If you're using the Winged Scarab setup, then you'll get slightly more XP than that. I think you'll get something like 84% of the XP of the entire map for each of the abysses that you do. And so you'll see that that is a massive, massive amount of XP that you'll get with the Winged Scarabs. So let's talk about some of the advanced approaches. So that's the basic setup covered, but some of the advanced approaches you can use. You can roll your maps with Bloodstained fossils. This doesn't really add difficulty, it just adds cost, and it also pressures your inventory space a bit. So Bloodstained fossils, as a quick recap, they're a rare drop in the Delve mines. Prices in trade are volatile. There's modest supply at 10 chaos and then deep supply at 20 chaos. There's not much in between, so I'm just going to say that they're 20 chaos a shot. Rolling maps with these grants a kind of bonkers mod. 10% pack size, where 4 to 7% is the norm that you get for a mod. 20% quantity, whereas you would get 10 to 19% for a mod normally. And there's a 10% chance for items to drop corrupted. In addition, it adds a bunch of Vaal monsters to the map. So it's that 10% chance for items to drop corrupted that matters here. Basically, every time that you loot an item that is big enough to have 6 sockets, so this is any body armor, any bow, or any two-handed weapon, these items have a 1 in 144 chance, if they're corrupted, to be 6 links. Corrupted 6 links aren't very useful to actually use as items, but vendors love them. They'll give you a Divine Orb for them. So that's basically the idea here, is that you're stacking as many monsters onto the map as you can, and then you're just rolling the dice on this 1 in 144 chance for corruption as many times as possible, with the goal of looting lots of Divine Orbs. So just be aware that corruption will ruin crafting bases, so don't do this above tier 16, or at least don't do it lightly above tier 16. I'll let you do your own due diligence on whether it's worth it or not. There's a mild anti-synergy with the Delirium Mirror or Delirium layers as well here, because this will ruin 10% of your cluster jewels. This isn't a big issue and shouldn't stop you from using Delirium if that's your preference and if your character is capable of it, but it is something just to be aware of. Additionally, if the market changes, you can beastcraft to add more mods to maps that you roll this way. So if you use a Bloodstained fossil on a map and you get a mod count of 4, you can then use a beastcraft that at the time I'm recording this video is not worth it, that will add, and it's basically mimics the effect of an Exalted Orb, but is limited to a map. At the time I'm recording this video though, the beasts for that craft are 23 chaos each, and so I don't think it's really worth it. You just use another Bloodstained fossil and try and get a better roll. But it is there as an option potentially in the future. So our advanced approaches we're going to continue getting harder and harder with these. So this is going to require an above average character and a much higher investment per map. This is the 20% Delirious tier 19 approach to abyss stacking. Your goal here is to loot staggering amounts of item level 86 plus bases for bulk sale. As a bonus, you'll get item level 84 plus clusters, and you'll get Saints treasures. So this requires misinformation. This is one of the this is the most expensive of the ivory watchstones. At the time I'm recording this video, it is 3.9 exalts, and it only has 12 charges. You'll also need Terror and Stalwart Defenders, and at the time I'm recording this, they are about 100 chaos for a pair of them. Again, only 12 charges. You'll want to apply 1 Delirium Orb to each of your alleyways, or you'll want to trade for alleyways maps that are already 20% Delirious. Then once you've done that, Chisel, Elk, and Chaos for mod count 5 or higher, optionally using a Bloodstained fossil, but I actually don't recommend it here because all of the bases that drop corrupted will be ruined. Once you've done that, Vaal a map as well if you think you can handle it. No skimping on Abyss Scarabs here, wing it or don't bother. Now, add all of these item level 86 plus bases to your loot filter and give them Awakened Sextant or Divine Orb sounds, depending upon the individual base. Supreme Spike Shield, that's a Divine Orb tier. Colossal Tower Shield, Divine Orb tier. Vaal Regalia, Sorcerer Boots, Sorcerer Gloves, Convoking Wand, they're all Awakened Sextant tier. Iolite Ring, Divine Orb tier. Cerulean Ring, Thicket Bow, Grove Bow, Imperial Bow, Ghastly Eye Jewel, Searching Eye Jewel, Imperial Claw, Chagrin Boots, and Titanium Spirit Shield and Hubris Circlet, all with the Awakened Sextant tier. All of these bases will sell. All of them will sell in bulk, and maybe you'll find some others. Note that not all bases can drop in new Vastir maps, so for instance, Crystal Belts with item level 86 plus would be Divine Orb tier as well, but they can't drop in this area of the Atlas. Next, you want to use a Gilded Divination Scarab and a Gilded or a Winged Shaper Scarab. Whatever scarab in your 4th slot. Expect to use 4 or more portals per map for loot, so don't die. Now, if someone buys one of your bases and you share a language, what you want to do is try and bulk sell to them. So for instance, if someone says, I want to buy your Imperial Claw item level 87 for 7C, what you want to do is reply to them, how many? And say, I have 35 plus. And then if they come back and say just 1, then, do the sale anyway. But if they come back and they say, yeah, give me 20, then you're happy. That's what you want to see. I have found that when I've listed a bulk of items from doing exactly this strategy in the past, often the third or fourth person that you sell a single copy of it to is looking to buy 50 of the same item. And they're usually really happy to get them all at once. Now, an optional escalation on this for groups that have an aurabot, more than 20% delirium, so more than one delirium layer. If you do this, every player needs to loot. It's not enough to have just one player looting. Like often groups with an aurabot have the aurabot be the designated looter. In this case, you want to have every single player in the instance looting. Advanced approach, Delirium Mirror tier 17. This requires a far above average character as well, and also a higher investment per map. You're going to be doing this in Alleyways mostly, but if you can do it, then do it in Burial Chambers. Burial Chambers is the better option, but Burial Chambers is very, very, very hard, as you will need to have the Terror Watchstone in play. So, your goal here is to loot item level 84 plus Cluster Jewels. This setup requires the Terror Unique Watchstone or the Stalwart Defender's Unique Watchstone for Alleyways. And Stalwart Defenders is much easier. So these are both add +1 to the monster level of the region, and so +1 to the level of all item drops. But the Stalwart Defenders one adds about 40% monster life, whereas the Terror one adds something like 30% monster damage. So Terror makes it much, much, much harder. Stalwart Defenders is much easier, but is a more expensive watchstone. You will need both of these watchstones for Burial Chambers. You'll note that for Burial Chambers, to get it to tier 17, you need both of them. We're not going to use Misinformation. Misinformation is too expensive and too precious to use on this strategy. You will then also need to spend 16 Chaos a map in raw currency to add the Zana mod. So you're going to Chisel, Elk, and Chaos your maps for mod count of 5 or higher. You will then be varling these maps. Again, we're probably not going to be using Bloodstained fossils here because Bloodstained fossils will ruin some of the cluster jewels. Although if you think it's worth it, then go ahead. Then you want to use Winged or Gilded Abyss Scarabs, both are fine. You then want to use Gilded Divination Scarabs in Burial Chambers or Polished if you are running Alleyways. Now, if you die, the map is mostly ruined as you will have lost the Delirium Mirror. It's still salvageable, so still head back in, but you're just then doing a normal Abyss. You're then doing a normal Abyss Sextant, Abyss stacking map rather than one that's super, super juicy. Also make sure that you set up the item level 86 plus bases setup on your loot filter. Rare monsters in tier 17 maps will drop them, although you won't swim in them like a tier 19 farmer will, and so you'll end up having to stockpile more of them before you have enough to sell really in bulk. The next option, and this is the most advanced of them all, is 100% Delirious tier 17. This is no joke. The monsters here mean business. This requires either an extreme power character, an aurabot, or both. Here, our goal is to loot item level 84 clusters, doctors, and more. So you're going to trade for tier 15 maps that are already close to 5 delirium layers. And so here you'll see at the bottom of the screen, I've got a search setup, which is maps exactly tier 15, and players in the area are at least 80% delirious. So you're going to buy these maps, orb them to 100% delirium, and horizon them into Burial Chambers. For watchstones, you are going to use Terror, you're going to use Stalwart Defenders, you're going to use the Maven Elevated Temporary Watchstone, and then in the last slot, you're going to use whatever. For Scarabs, you'll be using Winged Abyss Scarabs, Winged Divination Scarabs, and plus any other 2 Scarabs you want. For Zana mod, you will be using Abyss. Very important, you cannot do Alleyways very effectively with this setup. That's because Horizon Orbs cannot turn a map into Alleyways. You need to purchase 80 to 100% maps that are already Alleyways tier 16 for this approach to work there. There's no reason to do this just to save Stalwart Defenders, because that watchstone isn't all that expensive, not for this strategy. Anyways, this is the most lucrative option, the 100% Delirious tier 17 version, but it is also the most expensive. You could conceivably do 100% Delirious tier 19 in Alleyways if you wanted to, but then I think you'll find that you just end up with too much loot dropping. You won't be able to take all of the loot out of the map because ultimately you only have 6 portals. And that ends the video. That is the discussion of Abyss stacking. If people have got comments or questions, definitely fire away below. I intend to do a bit of streaming of this gameplay type over on my Twitch setup. and that'll probably be going later on today, my time, and maybe into tomorrow. So yeah, if you've got comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, may your Varlorbs have interesting results. May your Bloodstained fossils and your misinformations treat you well. And may you be showered in item level 86 Supreme Spiked Shields.